This winter break, my parents decided to spend their time in the village, at my father's parents' house. I didn't want to go, telling them I needed to prepare for my final exams. It was my senior year, after all, and college entrance exams were a serious matter. For the first time in my life, my mom and dad allowed me to stay home without their supervision. I finally felt like an adult they could trust, albeit with a few conditions. Make sure this place is sparkling when we get back, Mom instructed as she and Dad stood dressed in the hallway. It will be fine, I'm not a child, I replied, knowing I wouldn't cause any trouble. That's the problem, you're not a child, she said, looking at herself in the mirror. You'll be ruling the roost here. You'll bring friends over. And girls, Dad added with a playful wink. Oh, you be quiet. You've only got one thing on your mind, Mom said, shoving him playfully on the shoulder. It was more flirtatious than angry. They were always like that, constantly teasing, arguing, and poking fun at each other, a little circus at home. Everything will be respectable, I promise, I assured them. I don't need the lecture, Mom. Have a safe trip. Say hi to Grandma and Grandpa for me. But Mom started in again. You should have come with us. When will you see them again? They're not getting any younger. We'll see them. What's there to do in the village in the winter, anyway? I asked, immediately regretting it. Dad's face lit up. What is there to do? You can sit in the banya, jump in the snow, have a nice cold beer. Mom playfully smacked his hat, and his enthusiasm vanished. I'll give you a beer, she muttered. Let's go already. They walked out the door. Have a safe drive, I yelled after them. Take care. And then, silence. Finally, the constant chatter of my parents, who after nearly 20 years of marriage still couldn't run out of things to say, had ceased. When was the last time the house had been this quiet? For the next 3 days, I reveled in this unbelievable bliss. I ate what I wanted, stayed up late watching movies, and only occasionally studied, just so my brain didn't turn to mush. Time flew by. Preparing for exams? What preparation? I barely had enough time for my own entertainment. It was a shame I had to sleep at all. I wanted to stretch out this long-awaited freedom for as long as possible. The next morning, the phone rang. It was Mom. Still half asleep, I answered in a raspy voice, Yeah, Mom? For a few seconds, there was only silence on the line. Then, a quiet voice whispered, Son. What is it? I asked. Her voice trembled and then faded into silence again. Mom, did you freeze up? Talk to me. I shouted into the phone, sensing something was wrong. Grandma and Grandpa. They passed away, Mom finally uttered. What? They died? I couldn't believe it. It just didn't make sense. How? Grandma and Grandpa are dead, she confirmed, her voice sounding muffled and distant, filled with a deep sorrow and exhaustion. Why? I asked. We don't know, she answered quietly. When did it happen? I pressed. Just now? No. We arrived, and they were already gone, she replied. Then why didn't you say anything? It's been 3 days. All this time, I had been basking in my own selfish happiness, completely unaware of the tragedy that had unfolded in the village. No one had said a word. We just got caught up in everything, Mom said softly. It completely slipped my mind. I've only just collected myself enough to remember you still don't know. Her desperate calm was terrifying. I'm speechless, I said. My hand felt so weak that the phone suddenly seemed too heavy to hold. Dad says you should come out here, she added. Right now? I asked. Yes, he's asking for you now, she replied. We're a family. We should be together. Will you come? Okay. I'll just get myself together and head to the train station. Alright, son. We'll be waiting. The call ended, but I sat on my bed for a long time, staring at the wall, unable to pull myself together. Just like that, a life is cut short, suddenly and cruelly. Just yesterday, you thought your loved ones were fine, and today, the news hits you like a ton of bricks. They're dead. They're gone. I blamed that cursed village, that backwater place called Antokina. Even though it was only half an hour from the city by train, it felt like the middle of nowhere. Only a few inhabited houses remained, scattered among abandoned, overgrown ruins. There was no school, no clinic. How did anyone even live there? If someone got sick, it would take an ambulance forever to arrive. And yet, people stayed, and not just because they had no other choice. My father had spent years trying to convince my grandparents to move to the city, but they wouldn't hear of it. What? How could we live without our garden? They'd say. My grandparents were always bustling with energy. They simply didn't know how to sit still. They needed something to do, a purpose to keep them busy. I remember when they'd visit us, they'd be climbing the walls with boredom by the second day. Grandpa would try to fix and patch things that didn't need urgent repair, and Grandma would bake trays of pies that would inevitably go to waste. They weren't built for a carefree existence in the city. So they lived in their village and, in the end, died there, trapped. I got up, took a shower, got dressed, and headed for the station. On the train, I stared out the window like a man in a daze, my mind completely blank. Gray poles, foggy fields covered in yellow, withered grass, and patches of white snow flashed by. The January slush painted a dirty, dreary picture of despair. The train stopped at an empty concrete platform. I got off, walked down the steps, and trudged along the puddled road. A deep silence hung over the village. The houses stood like tombs. I remembered which ones still had people living in them and which were empty, though some were obviously abandoned, with hollow windows and overgrown with dry ivy. I knew the way well and quickly reached my grandparents' old brick house. My father's black SUV was parked in front, lightly dusted with wet snow. The gate was unlocked. I walked up to the porch and, instead of knocking, pushed the door open. It was unlocked, too. The stench of a corpse immediately hit me, and the air inside was almost as cold as it was outside. From the other end of the dark hallway, my father emerged. He was wearing a jacket, a scarf, and boots, as if he had just come in from the street himself. His face was gray, his eyes frozen. I had never seen him like this, but his expression was completely understandable. He had come for a visit only to find his parents dead. How must that have felt? "Hey, Dad," I said. "Hey," he replied, his voice barely a whisper. "Why does it smell so bad in here?" I asked, feeling the toxic stench claw at my lungs. "What do you think?" Dad responded grimly. "They died, but the boiler kept running. They were lying here for a long time." "That's horrible," was all I could manage. "And why is it so cold now? If we were to heat the house, the stench of death would be so thick you wouldn't be able to breathe." Coming from my father, those words sounded almost cynical. He was talking about his own parents, after all. He must have grown numb over the past few days. "Where's Mom?" I asked. "In the room," he said, nodding toward a door on the right. I walked slowly in that direction, not wanting to disturb whatever was happening in there. Mom was sitting on the corner of the bed, still in her outdoor clothes, with her collar pulled up. She was wearing boots and even gloves. Her lips were pale from the cold, her face expressionless. Her gaze seemed fixed on the floor, but it was really directed inward. I noticed a few gray hairs in her dark hair that I hadn't seen before. I quietly approached and touched her shoulder. She shuddered, raised her emotionless face to me, and said, "You're here. I wanted to see you so much. How are you holding up?" I asked, an unbearable sadness washing over me. Mom didn't answer, just lowered her head again. She hadn't accepted it yet. "Let her be," said my father, standing behind me. His voice was muffled and almost indifferent. It seemed like Mom was grieving more than he was, even though they weren't her parents. My mom and dad felt like strangers. I didn't recognize them. What had happened to the cheerful, joking couple I knew? Had the sight they'd witnessed 3 days ago been so horrifying, so traumatizing? "How are you guys staying here in this cold?" I asked, also speaking in a hushed tone, as if afraid to break the fragile silence of the gloomy house. "Why are you freezing? Just keep your clothes on," Dad replied without a hint of a joke. I went to the kitchen, filled the electric kettle with water, and found a mug and some tea bags on a shelf. I needed something hot to warm me up. Then a thought occurred to me. Was it safe to eat or drink anything in this house? "Dad, what actually happened? Grandma and Grandpa weren't poisoned by anything, were they?" I called out, looking into the darkness of the doorway. "No, not poisoned," he answered from somewhere in the hallway. "Where did you find them?" I asked. "By the cellar," he said. "By the cellar. So, right here in the hallway." That explained why the smell was strongest here. But it still didn't explain how they died. It felt like my parents were deliberately hiding something. I warmed myself with the tea, then went into the small room where I always stayed during school breaks. Everything was the same. A small bed, a rug on the wall, dusty cabinets, and an old space heater. I opened the window to air out the room. The fresh air diluted the thick, dead smell a little. Then I turned on the heater, sat on the bed, and wrapped myself in a blanket. I waited for some kind of instructions from my parents. If 3 days had passed, the funeral was most likely tomorrow. I spent the whole day on my phone, scrolling through meaningless videos, waiting for mom or dad to speak to me. They talked to each other about something. Their mournful voices drifted through the wall. They didn't joke, laugh, or argue. Why did this happen to us? Mom would ask. What did we do? We had to accept it. Nothing can be changed now, Dad would say, trying to comfort her. I'm so angry at them. I can't help it. What about Vasya? Don't you feel sorry for Vasya? Why did we call him here? He should have stayed in the city. Lyuda, it's too late to think about that. We're a family, and we had to do everything together. I listened and thought, why are they being so dramatic? Yes, my grandparents had died, and that was terrible, but it wasn't the end of the world. It would have happened sooner or later. I didn't wait for dinner. The unpleasant smell killed any appetite I had. I only went to the kitchen occasionally to make myself tea with sugar. And so that pointless day of mourning passed. I fell asleep in the cold room without even realizing it and woke up in the middle of the night to complete darkness. Only the red light of the space heater glowed like a bright dot in the blackness. The window panes rattled in the wind. The floorboards in the hallway creaked as if someone was walking out there. Suddenly, the doorknob jiggled. I had locked it with a small latch earlier in the day to keep some warmth in and to avoid breathing in that smell of death. Is that you in there? A quiet female voice asked. Who else would it be? I replied, thinking I was talking to my mom. The knob jiggled again. Open the door. Why? I asked, feeling a prickle of goosebumps on my arms. Open up, another, raspy voice demanded. What do you want? I asked, now doubting it was my parents. The voices sounded far too old. Unlock the door, someone grumbled rudely. He's asking what we want. In our own house. And again, the door shook. Mom? Dad? Is that you? I called into the darkness. No, the woman answered. It's your grandma and grandpa. Why are you locked in there? Open up. But you're dead. That's what my parents told me, I stammered, feeling my head swim. Dead, Grandma whispered eerily. So what? Does that mean you're not our grandson anymore? Open the door. Let us look at you. We haven't seen you in so long. The air in the room became unbearable. A foul, rotten smell seeped in from under the door. Go away, I pleaded, as if begging for mercy. I'll rip the soul right out of you, Grandpa growled. That sounded like him. The old man could be rough sometimes. Death hadn't changed him. Calm down, Grandma hissed. Are you crazy? Let's go. Let him sleep. We'll do everything tomorrow. The floorboards creaked, a door slammed somewhere, and it became quiet. What does "we'll do everything tomorrow" mean? I pulled the covers over my head, clothes and all, and curled up like a baby. What was that? Did my grandma and grandpa just visit me from beyond the grave? It was terrifying. I woke up shivering. It was even colder than the day before. Snow had fallen outside, and the edges of the window were frosted with a bluish tint. The old oil heater, though running at full power, couldn't fight off the frost. The room itself felt smaller, as if the whole house had shrunk from the cold. The memory of what happened during the night surfaced. I decided it must have been a dream. Without fear, I opened the door and went to the kitchen. I filled the kettle. It was so cold. I was lucky the water in the pipes hadn't frozen. A few minutes later, my father appeared, just as silent and grief-stricken as before, bundled up in his jacket, boots, and hat. It's freezing in here. It's impossible, I complained. Maybe we should light the boiler after all? Don't light anything, Dad snapped, piercing me with a disapproving glare. I had the worst nightmare, I said, trying to change the subject. I almost died of fright. The boiling kettle rumbled so loudly, as if resisting the cold, that it started to shake, sending a thick cloud of steam toward the ceiling. This house is a freezer. I dreamed that Grandma and Grandpa were knocking on my door, yelling at me for not letting them in. And why didn't you let them in? Dad finally showed some interest. I was scared, I answered. They're not strangers to you, he said loudly and sternly. Dad, it was just a dream, I said, confused by his sudden irritation. Yeah, a dream, he muttered, then turned and left the kitchen. I made my tea and went to their room. He was standing by the window with his back to me, tracing patterns on the frosted glass. Mom was sitting on the bed in the same position as yesterday. They both looked strange, even for people consumed by grief. When's the funeral? I asked, holding the hot mug. How long are we going to sit here? What funeral? Dad asked without turning around. What do you mean, what funeral? Grandma and Grandpa's, I said. They're already where they need to be, he replied, jerking his head vaguely toward some unknown direction. Seriously? Then what are we doing just sitting in this cold house? Let's go back to the city. I had assumed they were being kept at a morgue, that graves were being dug for them at the local cemetery. They've already been buried? Then why did you even call me here? I've been freezing for a whole day in this stinking house for no reason. Were my parents losing their minds from the tragedy? Why would we go to the city? Dad answered quietly. Are you out of your mind? I yelled, unable to take his dull indifference any longer. Mom, tell him. Is he joking or what? What are you two playing at? Mom didn't answer. She just sat there, motionless, staring into nothing. Mom, I pleaded. A faint spark flickered in her dull eyes. She parted her lips and whispered, he's not joking. We're not going anywhere. Why? I continued to shout, hoping to get through to them. Have you both gone crazy? Dad turned to me and said something completely absurd. Who would we leave the house to? It's an old house. There's nothing to steal here. I yelled. Are you planning on living here? It seemed like they had lost their minds. It's too late for us to live, Mom whispered with a strange sense of resignation, as if she had accepted some terrible fate. Why are you whining again? Dad barked at her. Mom, what are you talking about? I said, the mug trembling in my hands, spilling hot water. What do you mean, it's too late to live? We are staying here, Dad declared. The parents are below, and we are on top. It sounded like complete insanity, and I wasn't going to be a part of it. You're both crazy, I said. I'm going home. Goodbye. I was about to leave, but Dad quickly crossed the room and grabbed my jacket sleeve. Startled, I dropped the mug, and the hot liquid splashed across the floor. Stop, he screamed in a chilling, inhuman voice. You're not going anywhere. This is our home now. Let go of me, I shouted, struggling to break free. Dad's face was twisted with rage, but instead of flushing with blood, it grew even paler. Deep, dark circles formed under his eyes. He looked like a corpse himself. Mom sat on the bed, silently watching the scene unfold, her eyes devoid of any hint of life. Hold him and slit his throat, a muffled voice boomed from under the floor. Is that Grandpa down there? I asked, glancing at the dark cellar door in the hallway. Grandpa, Grandma, Mom, Dad, we're all here. Where are you going, leaving your family? Dad said, his teeth looking a dirty yellow against the gray, dead skin of his lips. What's happened to you? I screamed, though I was already guessing the answer. I just couldn't admit it to myself, couldn't comprehend such a horror. You really should go, son. Dima, don't touch him, Mom said suddenly. Don't touch him? Come on, do what you have to do. Grandpa's voice echoed from the depths of the cellar. Don't, Mom pleaded, rising from the bed. Dad reached for me again, but I shoved him hard in the chest, and he fell. Ungrateful brat, he groaned. I was lucky I was old enough now that we were about the same strength. Come here, son, Mom said, her eyes wide. We're already dead. We died. Grandpa and Grandma, they killed us. I want to cry, but I can't. See? No tears. I'm dead. She confirmed my deepest fear. It was all true. They were dead. Everyone here was dead except for me. Pale, cold, sitting in this frozen house like it was a morgue, the stench of corpses everywhere. I had to run. Run right now. What are you, a crybaby again? Dad grumbled, getting to his feet. The important thing is that we're all together. Grab him. He's getting away. I lunged for the front door. My pale mother followed me into the hallway. Run, son, she screamed. We're not people anymore. There are no people here. They're ghouls. Run from us. Her collar had fallen open, revealing a black, gaping wound on her neck. I fumbled with the lock, unable to turn the key. It kept slipping from my trembling fingers. Suddenly, there was a loud crash from under the floor. The cellar door flew open. I turned and nearly fainted at the sight. Crawling out from under the floor was not the grandfather I remembered. He was a green corpse, his skin peeling off in strips. His eyes had no pupils, only a murky yellow haze. Right behind him, Grandma emerged. She looked even worse, a green, bald thing, her face like melted wax. It was impossible to imagine these things had once been people, my own relatives. The old man crawled toward me on all fours like an animal. The air was instantly poisoned. Choking on the stench, I yanked the handle and tore the lock out of the door. Stay right there, the dead old man snarled. I burst out into the snowy yard, into the fresh air, and finally took a breath. I sprinted through the gates and ran down the slippery road, not daring to look back at that horrible house. I ran through the entire village, not knowing where to find safety. In the few windows I passed, I saw confused faces. I almost screamed, "Help!" but realized in time that they weren't living people. They were like my family. Corpses in various states of decay, pale, gray, green, their faces bloated and indistinct. I saw the station. The train was already there, about to leave. 2 minutes to departure. I scrambled into a car at the very last second, just as the doors were closing. The hood of my jacket got caught, but I had made it. I made it. I can't imagine what would have happened if I'd been left behind. The train lurched forward, carrying me away from that dead village. Now I'm alone again, in the apartment. A week has passed, maybe more. I've lost all track of time. I barely sleep or eat. I just lie in bed day after day, my face to the wall, flinching at every sound. The dead faces of my relatives, their terrible words, the smell of rot, it all comes back to me. I want to scream, to make it all just a monstrous fantasy and not my reality. I want to fall asleep and wake up in a normal world. I want my parents to come back, alive and well. I want them to walk into the apartment and say, "So, how did you manage without us?" But I know that will never happen. They won't come back. My mom and dad are still in that dead village. They are no longer themselves. And now, I am an orphan.